Um, what is going on, awesome people? In today's podcast, I am speaking with Daniel, a renowned speaker and author of multiple books, and we touch on the topic why you should stop meditating, and Daniel gives a little bit more context in that, so you should definitely watch that. And we also touch on topics such as consciousness and the spiritual side. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in free will? Curious to hear their answer? You should keep watching. So if this content does resonate with you, I hope it does, please leave a comment, please leave a like, please subscribe to my channel. With that said, I'm sending you strength, I'm sending you peace, I'm sending you love, all the good things. Here is to a bright future. Let's go. Welcome guys to the episode. I'm here with Daniel. How are you feeling, Daniel?
I'm feeling very groovy and good to go. How you doing?
I am awesome. And I want to first off say thank you for being here. And no worries. And for the audience listening at home, can you provide some background into who you are as a person?
Sure. Well, my name is Daniel Mangena. I effectively get the joy, the adventure of spending my days supporting people in creating the life that they want to live. And I know that there's a lot of cliches around that in the world these days. I think 2020 saw the biggest rise of people who all of a sudden were healers and coaches, and
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I found my calling. I'm here to be a coach. But I've been in the trenches of personal development for myself and for the people that I serve for about 20 years now. I didn't just pop up last year. It wasn't an easy road to get to where I am today. Sometimes people talk about overnight success, but it was a hard journey for me to get here. But I do genuinely get to support people through the work that I do every day. I'm a dad. I have a 2-month-old son, 5-year-old stepdaughter. I am from East London in the UK, the child of Zimbabwean immigrants, but I get to live in Mexico, in Cabo, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and see how my journey and the things that I've been through can support the listeners in living an abundant, joyful, purpose-driven life.
wow. All right. And is it true that you were diagnosed with Asperger's?
Yeah, I was diagnosed when I was 27 years old. That was a
late. Yeah, that was a late one. Wow.
That was a late one. You could say that.
All right, that's interesting. And how does it impact your life? I'm just curious. How does that impact your daily life?
The funny thing is that after I was diagnosed, it's like everyone was like, hey, have you got Asperger's? Like, for God's sake, spent 27 years, everyone just sort of leaving me here in the wind, not knowing what was going on. And now all of a sudden, like, my life just started getting populated with people that knew about it. I mean, I dated a woman that was like a head teacher, like a head of year at a special needs school that worked with teenagers with Asperger's. I dated a girl that worked with people that had adult autistic children. I had like my best friend whose brother was like severely Asperger's, and it's like, okay, where are all you guys for the first 27 years of my life? Because there was a lot of it was hard work, but I didn't know that something was necessarily wrong. I had a lot of upside. My Rain Man capabilities have been pretty cool for me, but it was crippling. I've had crippling anxiety, crippling social anxiety. Was unable really to hold down any kinds of relationships because I didn't have the natural wiring. I don't have the natural wiring for relating with people. But following my diagnosis, I actually found out more about my superpowers. So I can learn anything systemized. And what that meant was, well, now I know what the challenge is. I can go and look into it. And so learning about social dynamics, the way the systems of people communicating works, gave me a framework that meant that now I've got a lot more natural flow in my ability to relate to people because I understand the mechanics. So one of the key things for me and how I'm impacted is that if something isn't systemized and doesn't have a step-by-step system, I have meltdown. And it doesn't even have to be big.
Yeah.
It's like the smallest thing, like my Apple Watch, for example, I can't use the grid view. I have to have the list view. It's too much stuff. That literally gives me panic attacks. You ask me to solve the debt crisis for a third world country and I walk in there cool as a cucumber. You tell me that my bus is late and I don't know what to do about arranging how to get to where I need to go. I'll have a meltdown. But it's been a blessing because the work that I do is supported by my ability to take complex things and make them easy to understand. for no other reason than unless it's easy to understand, I won't get it myself. But that's really, really been a powerful gift that I've got from my Asperger's.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. It's really an insightful experience that you've shared there, and I want to go. This podcast is all about self-development and going deep. And I want to go deep with you. I'm going to go deep into the realm now. And I actually have a bone to pick with you, Daniel, because you're telling people to stop meditating. Now, I'm a big advocate of meditation. So you've just kind of, what's happening here, man? You're telling people to stop meditating. What's happening here?
I was waiting for that to go. So let me clarify. This is a deliberately disruptive statement that I make. I've got one of my t-shirts on my t-shirt line says "Stop meditating." I've got a hat, a stop meditating hat. And what do you mean stop meditating? Well, to stop something, you have to be in the process of doing it. So I'm not telling people don't meditate. In fact, I encourage everyone to meditate. But what I say is allow that meditation to be part of a holistic view of how you live your life and what you do for your life, not the place you stop. Because I think people get caught up in the sexiness of spirituality. They get caught up in the sexiness of mindfulness, and they don't actually create any change. One of the saddest things that I get to see in my life is people who have the opportunity to create change and get stuck in their practice. They have the opportunity, for example, to improve themselves. Or I'll give you an example, a story, just to kind of qualify this. I was working with someone a couple of years ago. She invested in herself, did what was at that time my highest coaching program. It's a 12-week coaching program. She gets 9.5 weeks into it, has her breakthrough. And do you know what she did right then, a week later? She says, I don't think I need to finish this work anymore. I said, why? She goes, well, when I read the stories of Yogananda and some of the other gurus, God gave them everything that they needed. I'm just going to meditate more and go deeper into my practice. I don't need to finish this work.
Okay.
And that's something that we see far too often. People that get caught up in what's on their vision board, get caught up in their mind movie, and don't actually look to the fact that we're not just one-dimensional creatures. We have a spirit, we also have a mind, we also have a body. Yeah. And if we want to create change in our life, then that change has to be anchored in physical reality. And that happens when we get up off our yoga mat, we stop meditating and take all of that power that we've tapped into, all of that wholeness that we've tapped into, and start to translate it into real results in our life. And that's why I tell people to stop meditating.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough.
Is the bone picked or?
The bone is picked, yes. It was a delicious bone as well. It was, I think it was a wishbone. Nah, thanks for sharing that. And look, we're still on the topic of depth. We're still on that wave of depth at the moment. And I want to switch it up here, and I want to ask you, what is your belief in God? Do you believe in God? And what is your definition of God if you do believe in God?
First and foremost, I love the way that we humans like to take the infinite and try to constrict it into something more manageable for us, right? I actually follow a concept that I call the purple brick theory. I was raised quite a conservative Christian household, but a lot of the stuff didn't make sense to me. And that's because my personal belief following years of study, and I mean, I actually went full in. Like I went and I was doing Shabbat every week with Jewish families to understand the religion and understand the Torah and the construction of the Torah and the construction of the religion. I did a Ramadan and prayed 5 times a day for 6 months and went to mosque with Muslims and learned how to read and transliterate Arabic so that I can understand Islam, to see why is this person saying that they're right and everyone else is wrong? I went and studied ancient cultures, shamanism from different parts of the Americas, going deep and understanding Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, Zoroastrianism, and these other small Baha'i and all these really small followers, religions with small followings, to understand how is it that, because I don't think it's possible that everybody can be right. But actually what I found is it's possible that they can all be right, because what I found was that if we take away blatant manipulation by people, I mean, if we look at the Bible as it is today was put together as a convenient narrative. It excludes things that were written that don't really meet that narrative. If you go and read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, books that were written by people that actually hung out with Jesus versus the Gospels, the youngest of which is 70 years after the passing of Christ, a second and third and fourth hand accounts. And yet first-hand accounts were left out. Why? Because it didn't meet the narrative. So when we strip away these things and take everything to its root, everybody's looking at the same thing. And you're going to say, how does Hinduism look at the same thing as Christianity? Well, in Hinduism, if you look at the attributes that are given to what we would call universe in Hinduism, that's exactly what we'd give to the Judeo-Christian concept of God. When we look at the idea of the gods in Hinduism, they're actually just manifestations and expressions of source energy. So if we go then into Revelation in the Bible, for example, and start looking at things like the 4 and 20 elders and angels and stuff like that, these are all, again, agents and manifestations and expressions of what we might call God. So if we go into the Great Spirit, go and sit with a Native American and talk about the Great Spirit, you're going to see exactly the same omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, these same concepts. If we then go into science and start looking at energy is everywhere and is in everything and does have an intelligence. So again, even science is looking at the same thing. So that's why I call it the purple brick theory. Everyone's looking at the same thing. And I believe that that which we call God expresses itself over time in a manner that the people who are engaging with it can understand and can relate to. And that's creating difference, especially in a world that's becoming more globalized. But I think if we're prepared to let go of the differences and come together on those similarities, those common grounds that we all have, then there'll be a lot less conflict and people will probably just get along.
Can you expand on that idea, the purple brick theory?
Sure.
And what do you mean by the purple brick theory?
In so much as that I believe that the thing that we call God is the purple brick, right? I use the color purple because it's nobody's purple colored. So if I called it a black brick or white brick or gray brick, someone might get offended. So I just use purple because there are no purple people. But essentially that same thing, we're all looking at that same thing from a different angle. So someone that follows Islam will say, I call my brick Allah, and I look at it from this angle where I have to pray 5 times a day. I have to give my zakat, which is like tithing. I have to do Ramadan every year, and I have to make my pilgrimage to Mecca. This is the side of the brick I'm looking at. A Christian looks at the brick. I believe in a single God, but there's a Holy Spirit, which is the moving agency of God, and there's the Son of God, Jesus, who came and died for my sins. This is my side of the brick. And then you go to Hinduism. I've got the universe, and the universe, I have gods that are manifestations of the universe expressing itself to take care of specific needs, such as my health, a specific need against children, a specific need against these things. You'll go then to someone who's on Zoroastrianism, and they'll have exactly the same thing. They're going to be looking at that same brick, but all of the principles are the same. Expansion, divine love, omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, wanting the best for us and creating us to express ourselves and to be the opportunity for it to know more of itself, expanding outwards. Spirituality, basically, it's like we're getting scared of using the word God, but it's basically the same thing. And I personally, I like to just allow people to be respected for the beliefs that they have, as long as someone's being a good person and not harming others and wants to add to the world. I don't really care who you worship, what you do, what you believe. I think it's more important to be a good human.
Really. Right on. Absolutely.
And that's what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said on that. And sticking on that type of topic, I want to also ask you, is free will real or just an illusion?
I don't believe that the universe is a tyrant, and there's absolutely no evidence for that, apart from we humans either wanting to surrender our creative responsibility, or people who have taken that and deliberately manipulated it to rob people of autonomy. God is not a tyrant. Free will is one of the fundamental principles on which the universe is built, but that does mean that we can't blame God or even the devil for the things that go wrong. We can't blame our mum or our dad or that person or this person. We have to take responsibility. But as humans, I think genuinely we're a little bit lazy, really, and we like having somewhere to shovel the responsibility to. But there is a beauty that sits on the other side of actually accepting that responsibility, acting on it, and creating our lives consciously from that place. That's what I practice. That's what I teach. That's what I share with people and empower them to do. And time again, I've seen that when people are prepared to let blame go, to let, you know, the running away of responsibility go, life just gets better, because the creation of your life is in your hands and nobody else's.
So you're more of the opinion that free will does exist? Is that what I'm reading? Is that
Free will,
yeah.
free will principle as a fundamental principle of the way universe operates.
So because there's a lot of research, I guess you can say, that indicate that everything is predetermined to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of did a bit of reading up on it yesterday, and it's interesting because I was always of the opinion that, yeah, we have free will. We can do whatever we want. If I want to just take my clothes off and run out around naked, I can do it because I have free will. I have the will to do whatever I like. But then I started thinking about it more and more, and I'm thinking about, and I think when I heard of the thing cause and effect, I think everything is impacted to a certain degree about cause and effect. So I'm stuck in two minds on this one. You know, I don't know which. We don't know which way to go on this one. So it's a bit of a difficult one for me. So.
Okay, well, let's break this down a little bit. First and foremost, the law of cause and effect is a universal law, right? So it's a primary universal law. But one thing I think sometimes happens with people sometimes is they try to take universal law in isolation. Universal laws very rarely work in isolation. They've got subsidiary laws, and they've also got laws that they work in partnership with. So that's one thing I want to put on the side. The other thing I want to bring to the forefront of this discussion is that I think when people are talking about free will, they forget that we have different levels of mind and different levels of being. All right.
Right.
So we've got conscious mind, subconscious mind, but then we've also got, depending on your belief system, soul level. We've also got genetic predetermination, which doesn't say that something has to happen. It just talks about the probability of something happening. So, for example, if I grow up in a household that teaches, let's talk about the racism question. This is something that came up recently. You know, people are brought up in a home where they're taught to have certain racial prejudices, whether it's people of color against people without color, people of this religion against that religion, tribal thing. Now, is that person doomed to always hold that belief system? To a certain extent, because the neural pathways around those belief systems, the behaviors that follow that, the thinking that follows that, the emotional response that follows that is programmed into them, but it doesn't have to stay. And again, I think this is where the concept of personal development and working yourself really comes in, and where I think some people get caught up in the popcorn culture of personal development and lose sight of the fact that it's freaking hard work. It's not easy most of the time. We're overcoming not necessarily even just predetermined ideas that are programmed into us, but generationally as well. You know, it could be generations of prejudice that we're working out, generations of lack mentality, generations of limiting beliefs. But we do have a choice about breaking it. Just because something is hard doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And when we talk about cause and effect, yes, we may be subject, and we generally are subject in the now, here and now, to what has happened before, the choices that we've made up until now. But we're not a slave to them going forward. Even the fact that we have the opportunity to observe and see the effect of a causation that we've stepped into earlier, we have an opportunity now to take our response to that effect and create a new cause that actually deliberately creates an outcome that we want going forward. At the end of the day, when we even go back to the double split experiment that Thomas Young did and people that followed, and how it showed the power of the observer effect on energy, right? And one of the things that comes from that is the idea that energy has pure, unlimited potential until such time as the observer has an expectation of it. That expectation is free will in action. It's a principle for how the universe is constructed. Energy doesn't have an opinion about the shape that it takes. We have stories and narratives that exist sometimes at a subconscious level, and therefore are harder for us to overcome. But the ability to overcome them does exist, just with a little bit more work sometimes than people are prepared to do.
Wow. And okay. Yeah, you've made me think now. So, and
Have I put a good argument forward for team free will?
you've put a good argument for team free will. I've always been pro free will, and
Mhm.
I've been a big reader of Sam Harris. He's the neuroscientist, and he's against free will because of that. The whole I'm not an expert on it, but I
Mhm.
guess yeah, I'm understanding that it's like this cause and effect type of
Yeah.
ideal. But yeah, anyway, I hope I want to move on from that question because there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
That
All
I
I would
want.
say, or
Yeah.
just to wrap on it, I'd say, look, free will may not have existed because I was not aware of it. But the second that I become aware of it, it may be work, but I do have the choice now to change how I respond to any effects of any causation and move forward. Because I mean, if something's happened, I can't do anything about what's happened now. If I've been punched in the face, I've been punched in the face.
Yeah.
But I do have free will as to how I respond to being punched in the face.
Yeah.
And I do have free will about how I move forward. The fact that I didn't take advantage of the free will that I had before doesn't mean that it didn't exist. It just means that I didn't take advantage of it. If now I'm suffering the effect of me not exercising my free will or not being aware of my free will, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist. It just means that I didn't exercise it. But I am aware of it now. I can therefore apply that and make use of it and exercise it going forward.
Mm. But I guess the point I'm getting stuck at is, isn't everything to a certain degree predetermined? Like
By who?
if I've done, okay, so if I've done, let's say if I've made a coffee every single day in the morning at the exact same time for the whole of my life,
Mhm.
then the next day the chances of me making a coffee are pretty high. So
Yeah, the probability is high.
the probability is high. And
Mhm.
is that predetermined? Do I have free will to not make a coffee?
Of course you
Or
do.
I do, yeah, I do. I'm
You
not sure if
have the
that's
free
the best
will.
example. I'm not sure if that's the best example, but
But I think it does touch on an important point, which is I think we sometimes get tied up with the probability aspect of it
mm,
because something's highly probable or because something's ingrained. Again, sometimes the work is overcoming and overcoming ourselves until we're ready to overcome. We can be so caught up in a behavioral pattern, whether it's lack mentality, it's how we talk, even an accent can be overcome.
yeah,
So the probability might be lower of something, it doesn't make it impossible. And the fact that we do have infinite possibility, the fact that we do have choice, the fact that we do have the governing principle of the organized of the observer effect means that there is no outer will. Oftentimes, what I find in my work is that people's unconscious programs becomes the externalized will thing that they're, oh, the will of this or the will of that. No, it's your unconscious programs, mate. You haven't taken command of those. You haven't stepped into dominion over them. And so those unconscious programs are determining for you. But even that can be overcome. It's just more work to do so.
wow. And thanks for sharing that. That's very helpful for me. And I want to reflect on those subconscious programs. So I want to reflect on your experience as a coach and what's been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced working with people and the subconscious mind.
Mhm.
I want to deep dive into that. Yeah.
I would say, really, it's allowing the narratives about what you're supposed to be dictated by other people. Again, giving our power away. So whether that's cultural ideologies, whether it's family or like community based ideas that are imprinted on us, whether it's just laziness. You know, right now we've got the media, pardon me, and the media is determining so much. I was watching something the other day about the power that Hollywood has on projecting ideas onto us about what's right and what's wrong, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And when you look at the political landscape in the USA, for example, and how a lot of people were being shamed into voting for who they, I mean, if you were black and you didn't vote for Biden and Harris, apparently you were an Uncle Tom, or maybe you don't agree with their politics. And I think both of them are idiots. So I'm not, I'm not pro either one. But if you voted against what other people said, then there was something wrong with you, right? We're being
Mm,
stripped of this, and this ends up being a part of the unconscious programs that we're running on, or at least the landscape against which we're deciding consciously with what to do with what comes from the unconscious, because we're allowing other people's ideas and other people's narratives to guide us in what we're doing, versus us actually taking a stand for what we truly want and then bending our subconscious to our will accordingly by doing the work that's required of us in order to make those changes.
Wow. Okay. And you speak of this concept, micro shifting.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to shed some light on that. What exactly is micro shifting?
Micro shifting is essentially an extension of the idea of the baby step. All right. What it does is it adds intentionality, and it adds another concept that I call minimum deliverables into the mix. Because I think sometimes, even with baby steps, we can take baby steps that are too big or that are bigger than we have the capacity to even really step into. What do I mean by that? I mean, I'll give you an example of a guy that I worked with. I always love to use this example because I think it's one of the most telling as to what I mean when I say micro shift. You know, he was struggling with procrastination around starting a business, and he was not making any movements forward. And so I said to him, go and buy a journal. He said, what do you mean? I said, go and buy a journal. That's your homework. So for some people, they'll be like, but what's buying a journal got to do? He's procrastinating around starting his business. He's got to start his business, and you're telling him to buy a journal. That was the minimum deliverable. That was something that he could do that moves him in the direction of actually achieving his outcome that's not going to be met with any resistance. And when we start to compound those together, making these steps that are not met with resistance, we're moving forward, creating a momentum.
Yep.
When we start to add celebration to that, which starts to change our emotional relationship to the steps that we're making, we start to break those patterns of procrastination, because all that's happening is that the mind believes that you not doing it is actually the most important step for you, because procrastination is actually BS. There's nothing that we're stopped doing. The subconscious mind is an absolute terminator. It always achieves every goal that it sets out to do. If there's something that you're stepping out to do, but you're not doing, it means that at an unconscious level, you are holding the program that it's not safe or right for me to do so. But when I take baby steps and introduce a new relationship to that, then I allow my mind to have a new narrative, because the mind isn't your enemy, it's your friend. It's just doing what it's been given as a program. And it's doing that because it believes that that feels good. But when you start to introduce a new pattern of behavior, a new pattern of belief, and mix that with oxytocin and dopamine and high quality chemicals and hormones in the brain, then the brain says, oh, maybe it does feel good to do this. And that resistance starts to drop. That builds momentum. And before you know it, you're actually being supported at an unconscious level. So micro shifting, I define as a consistent series of minimum deliverables made in the direction of a consciously chosen outcome. So we've got consistency, intentionality about where we're going, and doing what I know I can do today without resistance, no matter how small, in the direction of what I want to create.
Okay. You touched on procrastination there, and to a certain degree, isn't it? I've always thought that procrastination was healthy to a certain degree. I mean, obviously, yeah, to a certain degree. Just giving the mind a bit of a refresh and giving the mind just a bit of a break from the constant stimulus that we're all facing. Yeah. You know, you hear of the geniuses that work on a problem and then they go to sleep, they wake up and just through this period of break and then they come up with the answer, you know. So what's your opinion on procrastination?
When I define procrastination, I'm talking about an inability to move forward with something that I want to move forward with.
Okay.
Or that I've made a choice to move forward with, or I've set a goal for. You know, I've got a health journey, for example. Let's say I've got a health journey. I want to get in shape. I've got a goal to get to 15% body fat, or to have my blood at a certain place, or to have a certain quality of health or whatever. But then I keep taking actions that run contrary to that. Right? I say that I want my body fat down, but every night I'm eating Cheetos on the sofa. Right? That's procrastinating against the choice that I have. That's not serving me by taking a break. That's me actually taking actions contrary to what I've actually made a conscious choice about what I want to create. That's what I mean when I say procrastination. What you're describing to me, I think, yes, very healthy. Taking a break and giving myself space to step into what I'm creating, all for it. But if I've made a conscious choice to do something, conscious choice, and I'm failing to take the actions that are actually going to support that, then maybe something else is going on that I want to take a look at.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. And I want to step into your a bit into your coaching world,
Mhm.
and specifically, how does business and spirituality relate together?
I think, I love to talk about the holistic nature of the universe, right? To bring it down, the holistic nature of life. I think when we bring all of ourselves to meeting a goal or all of ourselves to meeting an objective, we're just going to be more successful, or it's going to at least have a lot more flow, a lot more ease and grace with it. So if we look at, spirituality, what we're doing is we're accessing more of ourselves that we don't actually witness with our five senses,
Mm.
whether that's through a spiritual practice, whether it's through mindfulness, whether it's through something like yoga or chanting, something that the effects of which aren't measured necessarily with normal instruments and aren't witnessed with what we taste, touch, smell, feel, and hear, right? So if I bring that into the mix, I'm just giving myself an edge, right? Over someone that doesn't have any practices that allows them to manage their emotional state, doesn't have any practices that allows them to keep their mind clear and able to function at a higher level. Business, we normally look at as operating, very dense 3D here in physical reality, but everything that shows up in physical reality started up as non-physical. Everything that is real was once just a thought. That thought had an emotional charge. That thought and emotional charge, when met with belief and action, became an outcome. So when I have the ability to have dominion over my emotional state, have dominion over my spirit, have dominion over my mind, I'm just going to be supercharged in my ability to take care of things and get it done. And that's where I feel that spirituality really factors in supporting success in business and in life.
Okay, well said. Yeah, it almost acts as an advantage. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, and what is your meditation mindful practice? I'm curious to hear that. What's yeah.
My standard practice is a bit off. I've got a 2-month-old baby. Anyone who's got
Oh
a
wow.
newborn knows that my schedule is not my own at the moment. But traditionally, I probably get about 2 to 3 hours worth of meditation practice in a day across the day,
Wow.
including morning practice. I do something called check-ins. It's a practice that I teach people. Just 15-minute breaks over the course of the day. I have 4 or 5 of those where I do heart coherence. I do some breath work. I tune in, and then some meditation before bed as well. I also practice Kundalini yoga. So I've got quite an involving spiritual practice normally, because again, everything that's physical started as non-physical. So when I take the lead in what's non-physical, then the work of bringing something to the physical becomes a lot easier, because it's just carrying something home, right? Someone's already
Yeah.
pitched it. I just got to hit it, versus me pushing and grinding and lifting. So, I find alignment from the inside leads to a lot more flow in what shows up outside. And what I'm doing outside is just taking the steps to receive what I've already created. And that's why I
Yeah.
spend a lot more time in my spiritual practice.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on heart coherence. Can you,
Mhm.
just for people, the audience that might not know what that is, do you mind expanding on heart coherence?
Sure. So the Heart Math Institute have done a lot of medical, like clinical and medical research and scientific research into this. I really recommend people checking out the work of Heart Math. They're a really great institution. A good number of my friends are heart math consultants and are trained to actually do a lot of the work with this. They take it into businesses, they take it into people's lives. But ultimately, the magnetic field around your heart, I think, is 10 times the size of the one that's going in the brain. And when we look at the coherence, and coherence, basically, if we're looking at, I know people can't see me, but if we look at squiggly lines on a page, right? The brain actually, when it's in a state of incoherence, that's what it looks like. If you actually do a brain scan, the brain waves are in this incoherent squiggle. That affects our ability to think. It affects our ability to choose. It affects our ability to function at a higher level. When we bring coherence to the brain, our ability to think clearly happens, to make choices that are aligned, and then our behaviors are going to match. The neural pathways that are being imprinted by that are going to be different.
Yeah.
And what's actually happening is, when we use the magnetic space of the heart, it actually it's like bringing the big guns into allowing coherence to happen in the brain. It's much, much easier to do it from the heart up to the head. So if when you're thinking too much, for example, and you drop into the heart, and there's some simple practices, I've actually got a free visualization on my website. Maybe give the guys a link to that. It takes about 3 minutes that guides you into creating heart coherence. What that does is it changes the way that your brain's functioning, which changes the chemicals and hormones running through your body, so how your body functions, changes your ability to show up, changes your emotional state, and brings you to a space of presence and peace that just allows you to function at the highest level.
Okay. Wow. Cool. That's awesome. And so how long have you been running your coaching business for at the moment?
What year are we now? 2021. It'll be 5 years. We'll be at 5 years this year. I did my first live event 3 years ago, but I'd started doing the work a couple of years before that in terms of actually sharing my stuff with people. But we're coming up in 5 years this year.
5 years. Okay. And what's been your journey going into coaching? I'm curious to hear how you got involved in that pathway.
I actually had no intention of doing any coaching whatsoever. I was actually running away from it. Okay. Initially, I just wanted to do motivational speech. I wanted to do my books. And that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I had a calling to do something with the work that I've been doing. The model that I created beyond intention definitely needed to be shared with people. And what ended up happening is that I made a deal with God, and I said, okay, I'm going to wrap up things with my successful business that I had and going to put some money aside. And then I'm going to dedicate my life to doing this work with some money in the bank.
Yeah.
And I had a Jonah and the whale experience, and suffice to say, the timeline got pushed up, and I ended up just closing down the business and coming to do this full time. And that's because I had a glimpse. I was actually on a meditation retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the US. It was February, so it was ball-bustingly cold, 6:20 in the morning or something to that effect. And I literally had this walking vision of exactly what my life would look like and feel like and be like if I just got out of the way and just went for it now. And I took the plunge. I gave up everything that I was doing, gave up my home, and went on the road teaching beyond intention around the world.
Wow. And how have you found that experience to be? It sounds like it's obviously changed your life. So yeah,
I'm really blessed, I would say, in that I've had a level of trust with God over my journey that meant that I allowed myself to be supported, because I think when you're making such a big leap into the unknown, we have to take a note of the fact that at this level of consciousness, there's only so much of the playing field that we can see, right? I'm limited to my senses. Even if, you've got extra gifts and you can see things a bit further afield, you're still limited on what you can see. And that's like, a soldier out on the battlefield that's refusing to listen to his radio for his people that can see, where the enemy's coming from, and saying, oh no, I've got this by myself. You're probably not going to make it, so I'm still the one that's in the battle, right? I'm still the one out here living my life. But when I allow myself to be supported, I get the advantage of the greater aspect of reality of even myself that can see more of the playing field. But that comes from having trust, and that's trust that's been built over time and through experience. And that definitely supported me. I don't know if I would have made it if I didn't have that trust. There were times when I didn't know how things were going to come together. Like I said, I gave up everything. I took my savings and I went, and there was a point where the savings weren't there anymore. And it was literally trusting that where I'm going to stay is going to be provided, where I'm going to go, how I'm going, all of that had to be provided. And it was in the most beautiful way. The thing for me was that, an angel in the form of a dear friend of mine and a mentor, Barry, came along and said, hey, what about if you opened up to receiving abundance again and creating abundance, and allowed that to be the space that you played in? And so I then got very deliberate in creating the financial abundance that allowed me now to invest a lot in myself. I invested $172,000 in my personal development last year. I get to offer my gifts and what I have to share with people without thinking about how much money I'm going to make for it, because I don't necessarily need the money. And that's come from building a life that means that I can trust and know everything's going to be taken care of. it is about the service for me and not the business aspect of it, because I do have other business interests that mean that I don't need to think about it in that way. And it means I can just sharpen serve.
Yeah. Wow. And you are an avid book writer as well.
Yes.
So how do you manage your writing schedule? What's your writing? You must have a crazy writing schedule to be able to, yeah.
Well, and so Stepping Beyond Intention, like my first bestseller that was actually around my Beyond Intention paradigm, that took me about 11 years to get out because
Wow.
because I wrote it and then I thought it was finished and then I wasn't happy, and then I wrote it, then I thought it wasn't finished and then I wasn't happy, and then I wrote it, I put it out, took it off the shelves, and then spent another bit of time writing it. But other than that, a lot of the work that I've been putting in print has been a result of really taking what I'm doing and what I'm teaching and putting it into print. So my most recent book, The Money Game, was taking the work that I've been doing actually on the front lines with the challenges, with the coaching around manifesting money. So it's a real practical guide, and then putting pen to paper on that. So it wasn't something that took me a long time to do because I had all of the material. The next book that I'm working on this year, again, I'm kind of taking my time with it. I don't have any intention to put it out before sort of October or November of this year. I've got the source material per se. I have the structure and outline. It's just kind of just spending some time chipping away at it. I like to work when I'm in a real flow. I don't force myself to write. When I feel like writing, I might write nonstop for 10 hours. And then I might not feel like writing anything. I might feel like dictating it and then transcribing that and popping that down. And then what I do is I then get people to proofread it, let me know what they feel about it. I like to give it to someone who doesn't know anything. Then I get things edited and then go from there. That's generally my process. I like to go from real experience and real tangible sort of frontline stuff and then putting that in print.
Okay. And at the beginning of your journey, you touched on how you put it out on the shelf and then you took it back off. That must have been a very almost painful experience because just mental torture almost.
Do you know what it was? Is that I'd given myself a deadline to get something done by a certain time. I rushed and I wasn't happy with what I put out. I knew that people deserved more of the book. And so the next day I took it down. I said, no, I really need to get this right. So I took another year to get it to where it is now, which is the book that we put out and we got the bestseller for.
And for those people listening, what is the book called?
Stepping Beyond Intention.
Stepping Beyond Intention. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your idea of the perfectionist mindset? Do you think that, I guess everyone has this troll in their brain that's telling them that, you know, they need to perfect everything in their life, or what's your opinion on that?
I don't believe in cookie cutter approaches to things. I believe that everyone's got their own experience. For some people, it will be perfectionism because they want to give the best. For some people, it will be the fear, anxiety, thinking about what other people are going to think about it. I think everybody's got their own experience with it. And I think what's powerful is to take a moment to ask yourself, why am I holding this back for want of perfection? Because nobody's perfect. And we can get things as perfect as they can be. All we can really do is give our best. And if we ask ourselves, have I given my best with this? Then that's as perfect as it's going to be. And there's a power to not allowing ourselves to be a slave to our idea about what other people might say about something, and just think about how we feel. Are we proud of what we've done? And going from there.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks for that, Daniel. I think I might end on one more question. I've got drum roll, please. All right. So, if you could teach everyone in the world one concept, what concept would have the biggest impact on humanity?
I would say not being so caught up in what other people are thinking and what they're doing, and just asking yourself one question: what feels good? What expands? What adds to the world and does no harm to others?
Wow. Beautifully said. And look, I appreciate the time that you've given me, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
I feel a little bit more enlightened now.
Oh,
Definitely.
brilliant.
Thank you. And how can people connect with you? How can people reach out to you?
Best resource is dreamwithdan.com, my website. My social media links are on there. I've got a podcast called Do It With Dan. There's a books page. I blog about 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I've just been made an executive contributor to an online magazine, so we'll have links to that there. But there's a free resources page, like the visualization I said for the guys to grab. That's all on the website on the free resources page. So dreamwithdan.com, best place to find me.
Fantastic. And thanks, guys. Do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. And thank you again. Thank you.